All right. Tuning in today about the upcoming and kind of interesting development on traumatic brain injury denials. I've talked about this a bit before, and definitely let me know if you can hear this as you're watching this while we're going through the chat. So basically, a while ago, the Department of Veterans Affairs had a particular issue, and the issue was traumatic brain injury. With the traumatic brain injury, they were not using qualified doctors to conduct the traumatic brain injury exams. It was an ongoing problem, probably from about 2008, and we ended up catching it in 2015. It was exposed through the press at Care 11, and I had helped them on the back end in researching this. And they had done an interview with me at the time. This is, I want to say it was a 2015, 2016. It became a national scandal. And the Department of Veterans Affairs had an equitable relief plan in place where they decided to send out letters to nearly 25,000 veterans who were affected. These veterans ended up having an opportunity, if they received the letter and if they knew what to do and to take action on that letter, or if they knew exactly what the circumstances might have been to where they may have thought that they would be entitled to benefits in that context, they had the opportunity to seek what's called equitable relief. And then in that context, to push for a new exam, hopefully with a qualified examiner, and then to in the event that you get a service connection, to get that service connection back to when you actually applied for benefits, which could be many years before, right? So these are very valuable claims to veterans, many of whom didn't get appropriate traumatic brain injury benefits. It was a big deal. And traumatic brain injuries, if you've known a veteran who has experienced a traumatic brain injury from like an IED or something like that, can be a devastating situation. And so, anyway, this is back in the news now, and Care 11 is all over it. These are the news, the broadcast news folks outside of Minneapolis that I have had the great opportunity to work with in the past, addressing this particular issue with the traumatic brain injury. This is actually my scandal from my own investigations that I had brought to them at that time, and they, went all over with it. It was really amazing about what happened with Congress and an IG investigation, and many thousands of veterans were affected. It was really important at that time, but now we're learning that it's coming back, and so. Uh, Two senators, Tammy Baldwin and Tammy Duckworth. So Baldwin is out of Wisconsin, Duckworth is out of Illinois, are now asking the Department of Veterans Affairs questions because they're concerned that some veterans were having issues with the. Hey, Lisa, good to see you. So some veterans were not actually either getting the letter, or if they got it, they didn't know exactly what to do. It was a big problem. And now Duckworth and Baldwin are asking the VA questions about this, and it's a very timely because we're noticing, as a VA accredited attorney myself, who has helped many veterans with traumatic brain injury get benefits. This is a difficult benefit to get sorted out, especially now that the VA has outsourced many, if not all, the exams, and so many, if not all, the exams have been outsourced to private contracted vendors to conduct. Many of those vendors are merging post-traumatic stress disorder with traumatic brain injury, sometimes improperly. And so what's happening is veterans are not getting the benefit of each uh, symptomology that can be reasonably separated. It's a big deal. But anyway, when it comes to this equitable relief thing, what we had learned was that the Department of Veterans Affairs has only four types of physicians that are supposed to conduct these exams. Now, four types. They are a physiatrist, a psychiatrist, a neurosurgeon, and a neurologist. Only four. And of these four, they're the ones that are supposed to diagnose whether a traumatic brain injury existed. Essentially, provide a diagnosis if it's relevant. But the agency wasn't using them, and frequently, even if they may have, they were, for whatever reason, using improper exams. Some of them are like the Montreal. This is what they're called. R-bands. These are exams that are generally for dementia, or historically have been used for dementia, right? And lack the fidelity, lack the sensitivity to be proper exams to measure residuals of traumatic brain injury. Okay, so residuals of traumatic brain injury. It's not enough to just have one. You have to have residuals of it. And many times, especially the unqualified physicians and nurses that were doing these diagnoses and the residual diagnosis and assessments were using these flawed screening tests. Now, the screening tests work probably fine for what they're designed for, but they're not designed to replace a neuropsychological assessment. And so, usually, what happens, at least in the civilian sector, is a veteran who receives a diagnosis for traumatic brain injury may warrant getting a neuropsychological assessment. That assessment is usually about 3 to 5 hours, maybe longer, maybe a little bit shorter, but it goes for quite a while. And that is what the oh, that's interesting. Sorry, so I'm seeing comments here, and I'm looking at this is okay. So this is if you have a comment and you're watching this, definitely put it in here because I'm able to see it. Brian, that's great news. Hopefully, they gave you the right back date and the right rating. And then Eliza, I'm seeing your situation. You know, that's well, that's not good. So I can get into the SMCT stuff in a bit if I need to, if someone has questions about that. But anyway, so the point of it is, with these traumatic brain injury denials, they weren't giving veterans an appropriate exam. And then even if they got one, there were issues with the residuals. And so they just weren't doing it right. And a lot of veterans were either getting no rating at all, it was being merged improperly with PTSD, or the rating was lower than it otherwise should be. And so enter in today. Now, Baldwin and Duckworth are circling back around in this equitable relief, and it came up because of a case involving a veteran out of Toma. Now, I've covered Toma quite a bit back when they had the Candyman scandal, as you may recall, back in 2014, and there were a lot of news coverage of Toma VA and just a whole boatload of issues that came out of that location. Now, there's a new case that is resurfaced and circulating, where a veteran by the name of, and I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize, Brandon Wineshek, who's a Native American veteran in that area, Marine, who experienced a horrific, it sounds like, traumatic brain injury and had lots of issues as a consequence, didn't get an appropriate exam. And even when he finally got in, and I don't know the year on this, but finally got into talk to a neurologist, the neurologist actually used, it sounds like, one of those screening tools, which is improper, to do that the way that it was done. And so by the time the veteran finally was able to get a private assessment to learn what had happened, he was outside of the window for the equitable relief program. And so you would think that, in this context, if the VA made this horrific mistake where they didn't give the veteran a proper exam, that the VA would have, the wherewithal to give that person an effective date, especially when it comes to traumatic brain injury. This is a type of disability that has profound effects on many individuals, even individuals where the traumatic brain injury on the surface may not have appeared to be that serious. But any type of injury to the brain can be catastrophic. So it's just one of those things. Obviously, it's your brain, right? It's sensitive. So anyway, having said that, now this is starting to come up, and we're going to start seeing more coverage about this. It comes at a really unique time. So we're going to see what the current administration and the current administration, just see what they do. Are they going to grant another round of equitable relief, for example? Because we're seeing instances where I know some folks didn't get the letter, or if they got the letter, it showed up late or not at all, or the agency didn't take action, a lot of different things. Or I think a lot of folks also, depending on how the VA figured out who should receive the letters may not have been fully sent, or some of the veterans that actually were affected just didn't get the notice. Well, tough luck. We only give you 1 year to sort it out. So they had been violating the rights of veterans for a decade, and they give veterans 1 year to think it through, right? And this is a person who likely has a traumatic brain injury and residuals, lots of problems, and they only give you just a tiny window of an opportunity. Now, in my mind, I think what should happen is if the VA screws that up and you notice it at any point down the road, that equitable relief should be an availability to you indefinitely, because the agency has, again, we all know they're supposed to be pro-claimant, which they are frequently not. They're supposed to be pro-veteran, which we know they are frequently not. And in this context, if you just assume those two things should be true, though, in the other way, then I don't see what the problem is for the VA to leave that open. I get that some goofball somewhere probably has a quota that is tied to their bonus or whatever, and so they want to close that out. But, in that kind of context, it seems to me that it makes sense to allow the veterans to reapply to get it done. Now, I want to point out one area, and the caregivers are probably very familiar with this, but when it comes to traumatic brain injury, when it comes to the SMC scales, one thing that y'all want to consider, especially for veterans that are caregivers who have husbands and wives and loved ones and friends, who they're taking care of, that if there's a traumatic brain injury at the root of this, and and I'm just speaking in generalities here, but just more broadly, if that veteran is like on tier 3 or possibly even tier 1, depending on the circumstance, but definitely tier 3, where they're requiring I think it's greater than 40 hours a week or something like that of care. And if they didn't get that care, they would have to be in like an adult living facility or something like that. There could be a call to get SMCT. Now, SMCT is very important because it allows somebody in that situation to get the kind of in-home care and not have to fight with the VA over it. And you may be eligible to $9,500 or more. So these are some benefits that the VA has. A lot of the VSOs out there it's a challenge even for us attorneys that are VA accredited to understand how the rating scale. It's like looking at an algebraic equation. It's nuts to figure out who goes where. But when it comes to traumatic brain injury, these are very complicated cases. And if you're a veteran or you are a loved one and you have a veteran that you're taking care of, and that absent, you doing this care, especially if you're in the caregiver program where it's well documented, that person may want to consider helping the loved one file for SMCT, and to point that out, at least aid in attendance. I mean, much less some of these other things. So it's definitely something you want to look at. It is becoming a hot issue again. At least 2 senators, U.S. senators, are starting to ping the VA about this. The VA hasn't replied, but those senators, if you look at the story, so this happens to be on Kare 11 News, but what they're doing here is they are, Senator Baldwin and Duckworth are asking VA to provide detailed steps, right? So they want VA to detail the steps that it has taken to ensure veterans are getting, quote, adequate TBI examinations, end quote, and to reveal how many other veterans other than Winashek have been denied back benefits because they missed the 1-year deadline. Again, I think it's unconscionable that in this country of wealth, where we can support countries like Ukraine and other countries that most people in America don't even know what's going on over there, if we're able to support those wars with billions and billions of dollars, shouldn't we be able to support the veterans that are in our own country who already paid the price? Shouldn't we do that? I think personally, before we send another check to another country, that we should damn well give our veterans the type of support that they fought for and deserve before we send one more check. Now, I sure would love to see a politician run on that one, but somehow I don't think they're going to get the PAC money that they like to benefit from when they run for elections. But having said all that, I do think that it's high time us veterans demand that before we're throwing out all this relief to third parties outside of the country, that we should at least demand care and consideration and appropriate adjudication of benefits for our veterans, because what better way to support our military system and everything else by making sure that those who bear the burden are taken care of, that their caregivers are taken care of. Hey, you want the greatest military in the world? Let's start there. Let's take care of the veterans that already paid that sacrifice. Prove to the future generations that we're willing to do it, rather than having veterans languish and sit there and plead and beg for the support that they're supposed to get. So anyway, if you have a minute, swing over to the Kare 11 website. They're getting back into a lot of what's going on at TOMA. Toma's had some issues over the years, some of which are astonishing, including a very just challenging opium situation or opioid situation at that facility. It was a big scandal back in the day. It was horrific, and I think that so I'm seeing this here, Eliza. Again, if anyone wants to chime in and have a question, I'm happy to answer it right here, if I can. But so I like what Eliza says here. I'm going to put it on the stream. So Eliza James writes, the funny part is that there is enough money to do both and more. One help doesn't preclude the other, but veterans always get the short end of the stick. I agree. Although I'm not clear fully that we do have enough money to go around, because I think we're about to come into a pretty bad recession. But assuming that we do have all the money that we do, I love these. So somebody, good, we got some trolls here. Awesome. I love to see the trolls. That's fantastic. Go figure, right? Thanks, trolls. I appreciate whoever's behind that. That's fantastic. Way to spice it up. I see John May. I see Eliza, John May. So John May writes in, they acknowledged my exposure to blast, but also denied my TBI while simultaneously admitting I'm assuming that says back exposure, maybe black exposure in line with my service. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, the disability compensation system has been a mess forever, and it just doesn't seem like that is ever going to change. So that's what I have to say about that. I wanted to talk about it today because it's a big deal. It's something that I'm passionate about helping veterans understand, especially those that are affected by the caregiver program, because again, I can't figure out for the life of me why those caregivers, especially that group, right? The ones that are so seriously disabled that they require assistance from a caregiver in that program. Now, to me, that should be a slam dunk automatic consideration for SMC, but it's not. And it should be, it's supposed to be, but they're just not doing it. Or if they do, if VA does do the consideration for special monthly compensation, frequently it's at a lower rate than what they're supposed to get. So anyway, I wanted to bring all this up. You guys should check out Care 11 Investigates. They're out of Golden Valley, Minnesota. It's right next to Minneapolis. Care 11 is a NBC affiliate. I've done they've covered my stories and my personal issues at times, but also they've talked to my clients through my law practice, myself. AJ and his producer are great guy. I mean, Steve are great guys. They just won a bunch of awards for coverage on a different topic recently. But hey Greg, let me here we go. So Greg writes in, thanks, Mr. Krause. Back in the days, they didn't check right. Well, they didn't even have traumatic brain injury as a thing that they looked at. It was post-concussive syndrome or concussion, things like that. Anyway, so he writes, they just gave us ibuprofen and sent us back down the range. I was denied because after over 30 years, no, right. So you would be surprised at what kind of documentation a person can find when they dig. So just Greg, I want to encourage you, no documentation, just make sure you go get a copy of your file. You might be surprised at what's in it. So there could be anything that may reflect that you had an impact to the head could be useful, and if you were in combat, then you may be able to get appropriate documentation from others that were around you that may remember. So there's a lot of different ways to make that happen. And then as long as the condition or the situation is documented, it should be at least easy enough to have a competent, hopefully again, competent specialist conduct an eval to assess exactly what's going on with you, to evaluate your residuals. Hey, Sean, and everything else. So those are some of the things that I've seen. I am probably going to put out a little bit more content on the traumatic brain injury thing because it is a continued issue. I'm traveling right now, so some of you may have noticed that my screen is a bit grainy. That is because I am not in front of my normal system. So this is what we got here. But I wanted to take a minute, talk about traumatic brain injury. If anybody has any questions about this, I there are a couple different ways to reach me. Of course, you probably are aware of, or maybe not, but some of you anyway may be aware. If you're wanting to talk to me about press stuff, I'll move this down so you can see it. That is my blog. Okay. So you can go check that out, read about these topics. If you're wanting to talk to me and it's more legal in nature, and you have questions about traumatic brain injury or whatever in this context, then you go to my website, benjaminkrauselaw.com. My contact information is there, or at least the contact information for my law firm. I can't guarantee I'll be the one that is there to field every call, but you can at least reach out, and we'll do our best to see if we can get you the information that you want. But anyway, I wanted to cover this. The Kare 11 story there's going to be more to come, especially with a couple senators that are starting to put in queries about this. There are a lot of other problems with how these traumatic brain injury examinations have been conducted and are being conducted. So I would anticipate there are going to be some reforms that are forthcoming. So keep your eyes peeled. But if you're a veteran out there or you're a loved one and you have a traumatic brain injury situation, definitely go out and find somebody that you trust who is a VA accredited attorney or even a VSO that you feel confident in. Again, the difference between an attorney and a VSO usually is a VSO will have some degree of training when it comes to veteran benefits, and they're really usually pretty good at helping file the basic documents you need for benefits adjudication. But if you do get in the weeds in a more complicated thing like a neuropsych situation, whether it be PTSD or traumatic brain injury or some mental health kind of scenario, you may want to find somebody that has more advanced training. So an attorney, of course, is hopefully most of you know, we go to school for 4 years, then we go to school for another 3 years, and then we pass the bar, and then we have to get trained on a regular basis on continuing education and all this other stuff to make sure we're current. That's what I'm doing here. Actually, I'm out of the area getting training right now on advances in what's going on with the Department of Veterans Affairs and cases involving veteran denials and board appeals and court appeals. That's what I'm doing out here. So anyway, if you have any questions, hopefully you know how to get a hold of me. Eventually you'll figure it out. Benjamin Kraus, this is my name. So if you just Google Benjamin Kraus Esquire or attorney, hopefully that will come up and you'll be able to reach me. So anyway, hope all y'all are doing great. Thanks for tuning in. I am going to look forward to more traumatic brain injury topics because it's a issue that is just needing so much attention, and these veterans need so much help. So until next time, God bless, and hope that all of y'all have a great remainder of the week, and we'll check in here soon. Take care.